So, sisters and brothers in Christ, it is my honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Lai I-Chung. Dr. Lai has served in many capacities in the Democratic Progressive Party, including as executive director to the mission in the United States and as a special assistant to an official embassy of Taiwan in Japan. But within the DPP, he serves in various positions in the Department of China Affairs and in the Department of International Affairs. Currently, Dr. Lai is the president of the Prospect Foundation and is also a president. He serves as the president of the Prospect Foundation. Dr. Lai is a graduate of Virginia Tech, Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, and has been a visiting professor or researcher at the Cornell University in New York State in the United States. And I am very grateful to Dr. Lai for being always supportive of the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan. Whenever the PCT would ask him to be a speaker, he always very happily agreed to do whatever we ask him. So he is a great friend, and I thank him for being always ready to speak about the politics surrounding Taiwan. And today he's going to share broadly about the geopolitics surrounding Taiwan in East Asia and the Indo-Pacific region. So, Dr. Lai, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Victor Xu, for your kind introductions. And I'm very honored to be here to share with you about my views regarding the geopolitical developments in East Asia. Particularly, the topic of my presentation is about the Neo-Cold War in Asia and the soon-to-be the hot war in Taiwan Straits. Also, regarding my relationship with the Presbyterian Church, yes, I am a member of Taiwan Presbyterian Church. And also, I believe that whenever the call from the Taiwan Presbyterian Church for me to do something, that's actually a call from God. And you cannot say no to the God's obligations. And just like you cannot avoid the taxes that you had to own, you had to pay to God. So that I consider this to be my honorable responsibility and very happy to accept. Now, about the developments regarding the new Cold War, and I will go on with the first talk about how the return of geopolitics from the post-Cold War era to the new Cold War era in East Asia. The issue is that the Cold War, when the Cold War ended in 1990s, it wasn't at first that we are going to see the reemergence of the Cold War again this year, like what we observed this time. There was a certain transition period, and I believe some of the dynamics within developed in that transition period contribute to the development that we have today. And then I will talk about the process, how China to become the new global hegemony. And it will follow with the U.S.-China competitions. In the view, I will say that I personally believe this U.S.-China competition is not just about the so-called great power competition in terms of the power politics. It's also a competition between two value systems. And then I will talk about the development, the tension in the Indo-Pacific. And I will attribute many of those issues, those tensions, as either China initiated or is China related. And so that that can tell us about how the centrality of China in the Indo-Pacific affairs in terms of how the tension rises. And I think finally, I would a little bit cross over to the domain of our esteemed revenues and the pastors. I will talk about that about this. We have to face down the major wrong and the people of faith and the challenge associated with the geopolitics. Now, the first about the return of geopolitics in East Asia. And I would say that the Cold War ended. The Cold War ended in the 1990s with the implosion of the former Soviet Union. And basically that ended the conflict in the European continent. But in East Asia, that's very different stories. But we also be mindful that about the Chinese Communist Party, 1 year before the Cold War happened in China, there's a June 4th massacres in 1989. And that, the so-called June 4th Tiananmen Square massacres has fundamentally changed the Chinese political trajectory since then. And also, following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, we started to see the so-called globalization. And globalization at that time was considered to be a part of international policy management and one of the tools to uphold the so-called rule-based international orders. So that when we talk about the globalization, as we're talking about now, the whole narrative about how the rule-based international order is actually laid ground during the 90s. At that time, the globalization was at infant age. And we also need to be aware that in those processes, especially since 1990 and the coming of globalization, China itself never accepted the post-Cold War international order or the regime. Even though China is actually a beneficiary of all the globalization processes. But the China, if you look at its official documents, especially during the 90s, China always considered those globalizations or the so-called engagement policy by the West is a ploy in order to change China from within, to transform China itself, and to uproot it, the Communist Party's rule over China. And of course, for the East Asia, in the early 90s, there was the development about the North Korea nuclear weapon program. And later on, there was also the India-Pakistan, especially Pakistan's low-intensity warfare against India for other, due to the dispute between India and Pakistan they have. And I would say that those two things actually also become another important facilitators for other geopolitical trends in the Indo-Pacific area. In terms of North Korea, the nuclear development and the associate proposed solutions or the management tool to manage the North Korean nuclear weapon program, that actually has the effect of the outsourcing the geopolitical management from the United States to China for the East Asia affairs. And the Pakistan's low-intensity warfare against India, that also later on to materialize itself into the, we started to see the proliferation of the cross-national terrorism that attack that we started to see in the year 2001 and 9/11. Now, next, transparent. When we talk about the China as it started to become the new global hegemony as it is now, that when we review the process, we can first see that the China under the Deng Xiaoping, when China under Deng, that's actually Deng Xiaoping, the China was about to emerge out of the very traumatic Cultural Revolution era. And China at that time wanted to re-enter the international system. And also the after 1989 Tiananmen massacres, which is actually under the direct order of the Deng Xiaoping. In the aftermath, China was trying to re-enter the international system while not paying too much price for what they did in the Tiananmen massacres. And in the 90s, when the globalization started to take place, that effect for China is actually have provided China much needed recent boost. Because of globalization itself talks about the engagement, as engagement is the primary tool and the norm for the international affairs management. And the sanctions, whether that's economic sanction or political sanction in other means, although earlier already been disapproved by some of Western states, but it is actually the globalization itself helped to serve the narratives that the engagement is the right way in order to, should we expect any change from China? And especially engagement in terms of economic exchange, that could provide the Beijing or the China the incentive for its domestic reform, and also could help to grow the middle class, which is necessary for the democratization of all the societies. So those are the narrative associated with globalization and how the effect of globalization at that time helped China to quickly get out the Tiananmen Square international isolation campaign against it, and also provided with the kind of economic engagement that's very necessary for its growth. But this process also later on gave China the idea that for whatever it did, even though with the terrible acts it committed during the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, the world society will soon get over it, or even more devious, forget about it in 2 to 3 years. And so that when you are able to get away with that kind of wrongs in such a short time with little consequence or cost, then I think what kind of the message we are sending, or at that time the world is sending to the CCP regime, and that is something that the people need to ponder. And of course, this process about globalizations, although in the West, especially in European, they talk about the how to transcend the nationalism, how to integrate all the European states together, so that they can form a post-national super societies, and that everyone could put in all the resources to manage the real issues, the global issues at hand. But the Chinese Communist Party has always been very hostile to it. And especially Chinese Communist Party is very hostile toward the issue about the human rights, democracy, and the liberal values, which they consider to be the hostile and could be the harbinger for the domestic change or for the domestic upheaval against the communist regime. And China, since then, always tried to come up with something different in order to replace them. So if you look at the Chinese behavior during the 90s, at first facing international condemnation regarding the human rights record, China, at first, they tried to dodge the bullet, and later on, they started to come up with their own paper documenting about the human rights problems in both the United States and other Western democracy, by arguing that China and the West is not really have any preference or the moral high ground to criticize China, that everyone is equally bad, so that no one can criticize each other. But later on, I think the year 2018, China came out with a new offensive by going after entering the United Nations Human Rights Council and try to fundamentally change the definition about the human rights by placing the national sovereignty as well as the development above the universal values about the human rights, so that it becomes a new tactic by China now. Next page, please. Now, when we look at also the process about the Chinese rise, at least first it rise become Asian hegemony and later on become the global hegemony. The process of the Asian hegemony, we know that during the 90s globalization, and China started to enjoy the economic development and prospers. And then as the time goes by, in year 2003, and China was so confident about the level of its own development, it started to proclaim the era of the so-called peaceful rise of China. And that was first came out by the deputy principals of the Chinese Communist Party school, Mr. Zheng Bijian, in his speech and also in his writing in the Foreign Affairs in the same year, proclaiming the coming of age for the peaceful rise of China. And then if you look at the economic rise of China, that was also the era of the very unprecedented the Chinese economic growth. During the 90s, the Chinese already registered a impressive economic growth. But if you look at the time from year 2001 all the way to year 2008, you actually see the Chinese almost double the kind of economic growth number than it was in the 90s. So that looking at China, that a country of this scale and the economic growth in that speed, that really put a very impressive and staggering phenomenal figures that the people are seeing. So that in year 2007, before year 2007, China quickly surpassed the economic overall volume of the first United Kingdom and then Germany. And then in year 2007, when China overtook Japan to become the #2 economy in the whole world. And then year 2008, the global financial crisis actually put China on even more ahead of the country that already lead. That is the issue about the global financial crisis, which came from the Western democracy due to the unmanaged the capitalism and the speculative capital flights that in the process also propel Chinese to become probably for many countries of the need for the last resort for the economic development for their own countries. So that actually uplifted Chinese global importance. And associated with those is that the Chinese internal documents in the debates regarding the future U.S.-China competitions, China started to take the view that the future trajectory will be the decline of the United States and the rise of China. And it is just a matter of time about when China will be able to surpass the United States. But and associated with those is that in comparison with Asia Pacific, China started to have a confidence about its own power and started to behave as it is. And then in year 2010, the ASEAN meetings, there's a famous incident where the Chinese envoy Yang Jiechi there tell the ASEAN's foreign minister ambassadors about the way that how those countries should deal with China by saying that China is big and you're small. So that's the reality, and just deal with it. And year 2013, that is also the time that China started its process about the land grab in the South China Sea. That sets up a whole series of the event and militarize the tension in the South China Sea as we saw today. Next, please. The Chinese rise to the Asian hegemony after when we talk about the South China Sea's Chinese endeavors since year 2013, that year 2013 was also the year that China proclaimed about the initiative of the Belt and Road project, One Belt, One Road, and later it has been renamed to Belt and Road project. And that Belt and Road project, although it built itself as this is a mega international investment for the infrastructure that's needed for the Asia, Central Asia, and Africa, but the activity by China is actually contributing to the so-called debt trap diplomacy. That by indebting many of the recipient states, China was able to acquire either the strategic important mineral resources or the oil or other important facility that's for the Chinese later on strategic usage, but also led China to gain the control about those countries' government. Those government, either they have to accept the bankruptcy of their country, or they have to just listen to what China wanted to do, getting the Chinese sustained support in order to let them to be above the water. And year 2016, probably many of them you know that the Chinese rejected the Hague Tribunal about the South China Sea's verdict, and continue its activities since then. And just as our chairman during the introductory remarks mentioned about the China-India bloody dispute, that is the last year on June, the dispute between China and India started to result to the casualty of more than 20 Indian soldiers and also a known number of the Chinese soldier and officers. And that bloody contest, the bloody conflicts, is actually for the first time since 50 or 60 years. And the way that China break the norm and start to exercise the military pressure, that is another thing that we started to notice, especially after the pandemic hit. China take that as an opportunity for the China to exercise and extend it. Its regional influence, the activity across the China-Indian borders, and also activity by China in the South China Sea, and also including their harassment against Taiwan. That all become that was also part of the Chinese action initiative since then. Next, please. This I'm just going to show you the issue about the current competitions. That is when we look at this map, shows the so-called first island chain and second island chain. We have to say that although during the World War II, if you look at the Japanese advancement or their invasions, yes, there seems to be the trajectory about how Japan first conquered through Taiwan and conquered the Philippines, and its initiative in its advancement in the Indochina, and also Japan's marching downwards all the way to Australia through the first and second island chain. But it is Chinese military establishment started to popularize about those two concepts, as the first island chain is the one that take that as the target about how China will be able to penetrate through in order to control the country within the first island chain. And then in the first and second island chain, that China believed to be the area where the China will be need to fight against the United States. So that when we have this designation by China military establishment regarding first and second island chain, the Chinese action is actually also according to those military demonstration and acting upon the plan. So that if you look at the Chinese military activity since year 2020, after the pandemic, when the United States military presence in the Asia Pacific start to need to be halted, due to the pandemic itself. And China actually took that opportunity to quickly move and advance. And in the area of the contest and in the area of the incursions, you could all find out that it's within the so-called the first island chain. Of course, in the continental Asia, what China did was a push forward across the disputed border between China and India. and then China also had the so-called the non-military, more peaceful means in terms of how they are able to gain some strategic foothold in the area between first and second island chain. And one of them is particularly about how they are able to do something regarding the Solomon Island, how China wanted to build up the dual use, the undersea submarine cables. Many of them, we believe that it is for military usage, and also for the purpose of trying to cut off the United States and Australia linkage. So those are the issues that when we look at what Chinese activities, and we believe that the first and second island chain, the demarcation on the map, really means something to them and how they are acting upon it. Next slide, please. And then after China reached the hegemony in Asia, now this is we started to see the Chinese really quickly march forward to try to get to a global hegemony. I think one of the events I like to highlight is that China pushes its version of the human rights into the United Nations in 2018. Not only in 2018, the Human Rights Council has a resolution included the Xi Jinping's language regarding the so-called common prosperity for humankind. Although those words seems to be a little bit naive, innocent, in a sense that it just talk about how the global human society can prosper altogether. But for China, the common prosperity actually has some connotations regarding how a specific action can be viewed as a common prosperity, how the prosperity should focus on the economic development itself, how the prosperity itself and the so-called individual human rights, when they are in colliding forces, which one should take the precedence? So it's actually a coded language by China, and through the Chinese influence in the United Nations and also in the United Nations Human Rights Council, that China was able to push this and have this as part of the UN language. And associated with those is that the human rights, you can find out that the content regarding the international human rights as a universal value also has been diluted by injecting Chinese insistence on the developmental rights as well as the national sovereignty should take precedence. And the problem about those started to resonate in others, and especially when the pandemic hit since the year 2020, this narrative got another uplifting by China by saying that the Chinese authoritarian system, although it does not respect individual human rights, but it was able to effectively to deter and even to control the pandemic. And on the contrary, the democracy, especially Western democracy, their poor record or their not so good record in combating the pandemic was taken by China as a proof that the authoritarian system works, while the democracy has its flaws. And also interesting, precisely because of the Taiwan as a democracy, and we were successfully to manage the pandemic. That makes the Chinese an aggression toward Taiwan even further, because our existence and the way we did, in my view, is a living disproof about the Chinese narratives. And that makes China very angry. And so that when we talk about US-China competition, especially since the year 2018, we have to view that this is not just a competition between two powers. It's actually a competition between two values, because first of all, China wants to push its own version about human rights, about how the political system should do, and especially targeting against democracy. And second, China is backing it up with a military aggression to the periphery, and in the final, what China wanted to do, according to the Xi Jinping, his plan about the year, what China wanted to achieve in year 2035 is the military could actually compete against the United States, and the year 2049 is the first way socialist military hegemony of the whole world. So those are the things that we need to, we are paying very special attention to it. Now the next, so this is basically a repetition about how the value about the two systems, the competition, that's actually underscored the so-called US-China competitions. Of course, the people would like to ask that the Trump administration, because it is during Trump administration that the US-China competition started to heat up. But President Trump himself is not the best representative about the so-called about the value itself. But when we look at this, I think we need to look beyond the leadership, whether that's Trump for the United States or the Xi Jinping for the China. Is that we have to look into the behavior and also the competition where they're based, so that the from trade war to technology war from year 2018, what evolved right now is that this technology war, especially in digital realm, what China wanted to do is to create a certain digital governance in which the individual rights could be suppressed due to the requirements for the safety management, and that it will give power not only to the states, but it will subjugate individual rights to the higher authority. Because the narrative is that the higher authority, through the effective management about all the resources, could provide a better protection for the individuals. And that right now, this competition was starting to heat up in the digital area, and this is something that about to happen. And also, and after the Trump administration, the Biden administration continue the competition policies. Of course, the Biden administration wanted to have is actually the competition without the catastrophes, so that the competition itself, although not as verbally as severe as during the Trump administration, but the intensity is still there. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I do not know, that Taiwan right now sits at the center of this competition, because as I've mentioned earlier, in terms of the value, the China, the narrative regarding how the authoritarian system is better to fend off the pandemic, and Taiwan is a living disproof about this narrative. And also, the Taiwan happened to have the most important technology as well as the necessary ingredient for the future development of the future society. That is the semiconductor and the wafer productions. And sitting on this mind, whether that's a curse or that is the bless, not only the world needs Taiwan more, but also that also makes China want to have Taiwan more in order to acquire those necessary ingredients for the future society development. And the third is that the Taiwan, just look at the geopolitical location of Taiwan. Taiwan is set in the center of the first island chain. And for China really to want to control the first island chain and then to fend a effective competition with the United States between the first and second island chain, China need to have Taiwan. So that all those three things together, that's that they add up and propel the attention across Taiwan, especially the tension raised by China against Taiwan to become higher and higher. So the next. So this is just a small demonstration regarding one incident. We are basically having those almost every day. One incident regarding Chinese air harassment against Taiwan. I'm just showing one on some typical days. We see that Chinese plane, J-16, J-11, YA, YASW, and others are coming in. The red square is about the ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zones. of course, which is not a Taiwan's airspace, but it's necessary for Taiwan's air defense because we're so close to China. And we just cannot wait until the Chinese intrusion into our airspace and then we react. So that any given day regarding the Chinese air intrusions, what we have is actually sometimes in the number of 10 or even 20 Chinese fighter jets entering the area, accompanied with the plane that for the anti-submarine warfares, and also the reconnaissance to do the electronic jamming, and also the early warning, such like those. So those are the scenario of China is operating or demonstrating or practicing the invasion or the war on Taiwan, and we are experiencing every day, every single day. So that's this is how the state in Taiwan that we're facing, and the tension that is actually rising in this area. And so the issue definitely that the Taiwan is at the center, but the attention is not just about in Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific. China also initiate the aggressive behavior towards Japan and in South China Sea and also China-Indian border. But also to a lesser extent, China also has something about the air intrusion into the Korea ADIZ. So that basically, I would say that all the country on the Chinese peripheries now experiencing the China aggressive behavior by China. And recently, the talk about the Chinese probably launch war against Taiwan. The time frame people are talking about is probably between 3 to 5 years, and this is not a wide guess because the calculus is that from now all the way to the end of year 2022, there are two political events that China needs to first get through. The first one is the Beijing Winter Olympics, and then the second one is the year end, at the end of the year 2022, that the CCP will have its own 20th National Congress, in which the Xi Jinping wanted to prolong his tenure to get a necessary third term. But after the year 2022, when Xi Jinping is sure to have his third term, then all the political constraints on China and the Xi Jinping will be gone. And the tension probably across the Taiwan Strait and also probably with other countries will start to rise. Particularly from year 2024 to year 2025, in which Taiwan has a major presidential election, and the US also has its own presidential elections. These two elections could be the time frame that China is looking at whether the Taiwan elected a person of Chinese like or dislike, and China decided to do something or not to do something. That is one calculation. Another is that if the year 2024, the United States also had political changes, and one of the window for Chinese action against Taiwan is near the year 2024 and the beginning of year 2025, when the United States is at the transition period. Then that period could provide the necessary operation window for China to launch the attack on Taiwan. And if it's not those time, the year 2027 could be another important window that we need to look at, precisely because that Xi Jinping at that time probably he needs to deliver what he promised about the uniting Taiwan before the end of his third term, because for Xi Jinping to be able to gain the approval from the Communist Party overall for the unprecedented three-term General Secretary, he needs to deliver something that's big. And to some people, they believe that the Taiwan Trophy is such a big incentive for the Xi Jinping in order to acquire the achievement of his third term. So this is the issue about the purpose of war according to political calendars. But when the people talk about the military capabilities, it is known that the Chinese right now, due to the huge investment and the completion about the military hardwares, right now China already has a military advantage over Taiwan. But probably China will have the capability to have the amphibious operation against Taiwan in probably 3 years. And then from year 2005 to year 2007, the era where the United States, many of the military equipment will be retired, and that also will present China as another window of opportunity, because at that time the United States military could face a significant shortage vis-a-vis China. So when we talk about the war scenario in Taiwan, we are not just as a random check. We are seriously ponder these possibilities. And about the China related, there's also the North Korea nuclear programs, its military harassment against South Korea and Japan, and of course the Pakistan nuclear program, the what's happening in Nepal, and earlier this year regarding the Myanmar, probably in South Pacific, many of them. Although they are not China initiated, but they are facilitated, or their condition has been worsening due to some of the Chinese practices or policies. I have to say that there are, of course, a different reason for different actions, but the result was that the tension has been prolonged or have been renewed due to those factors. And those factors, many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but many of them is associated with the Communist Party and China themselves. Next. And I will just quickly come to the end about the what I was reporting. I'm going to report today. I think facing these situations, there's a criticism right now when we talk about the U.S.-China, the China competition and United States response. One of them is that this is basically what we're facing today is actually a U.S.-China power competitions. This is competition between two powers, the China United States is as wrong as China, whether how the attention has been risen and how the action about those contribute to the problem here. But I have to say that in my view, China is in a very different categories. Not only China has domestic abuses about human rights, but through the One Belt One Road and other digital means and its economic export, as well as its technology and sourcing out to other countries, China is actually exporting the human rights abuses and also the kind of global surveillance system on individuals and export them to the overseas dictator states, especially by empowering those dictators around the world. And China is also willing to lie just about anything, and there's no respect about justice and human rights value, which we all know very clear. And the issue right now is not just about this Chinese trying to exist, but the issue is about how to glorifying CCP. That is right now their central concern. And we have to say that the treatment of the Uyghur, basically in my view, that's equivalent to the genocide. And the recent Chinese behavior in the digital realm by erasing the people's footprints, their existence, basically that is a form of digital and cultural or the racial holocaust, in my view. There is happening. And of course, the United States is a flawed democracy. I'm not going to say it's not perfect, because it is a democracy with a lot of wrongdoing and of its own. But my view is that China is in a different category. China is basically an evil empire, or the CCP itself is come out with the evil empire. And so, in my view, there's no moral or immoral equivalency between those two countries. In my view, I do not think they're equally bad. So probably I'm a little bit crossing over to the domain and category. I should not.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So this is my last transparency. This is my last transparency. We had to face down the major wrongs. The geopolitics about power relations and about the nations, and it deals with peace, war, and resources distributions. But I think the faith is about right and wrong, and the longing for the justice through repentance and redemptions. I'll just quickly I'd like to read out my last sentences here. the CCP China right now is a major wrong, needing to be confronted. And the best way to deliver us from and the Chinese people from evil is actually to face down the CCP regime at every encounter that we are having with them. So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lai.